Hi, I'm Bill Stanczykiewicz, Assistant Dean for External Relations at the Indiana University Lilly Family School of Philanthropy. And I'm joined today by my faculty colleague, Dr. Trish Snell Herzog. And Dr. Snell Herzog teaches a wide range of topics for us at the college and is an accomplished award-winning researcher that brings her expertise into our school and applies that to philanthropic studies for our students. And Dr. Herzog, let me ask you first, people always wonder, how did you get into this type of work? Was there a special moment? Did this evolve over time? What led you into a professional career of research and teaching in the academy?
Hi, thank you so much for having me today, Bill. I think it's both. I'm a both and kind of answerer. So I think it was evolved over time, and there were also some special moments along the way that were more eureka aha moments. But the evolving over time is that ever since I was a kid, and especially as a teenager and a young adult, I've been interested in issues of justice, especially social inequality and economic justice. And so that led me, of course, to a love of philanthropy and thinking about how contributions can help address redistribution and, a kind of a better sharing of wealth across different social groups. And then there were particular moments that really stand out to me in terms of like the moment that I knew I wanted to be a researcher was in my master's degree program, where I had a chance to work with several faculty who were amazing, who just inspired me. And I had been planning to have a career as an executive director or, work for a community organization, but I saw what the faculty mentors that I had did, and I really looked up to that, especially the ways that data can actually be part of justice and transparency and helping make sure that the field is accountable.
You saw an additional depth there in the research. You saw an additional texture and context that you could understand that informed your passion for social justice. How does that then translate into your work in philanthropy? And as I recall, your formal training is in sociology, correct?
Correct. Yeah. So I always like to just start off with a little explanation of what sociology is when I'm talking with students, because, we all come from a variety of backgrounds and disciplines in this field. So I would say very simply, sociology is the study of human relationships and institutions. And what I like to say is that means that we're really fascinated with everyday people, not just the leaders, not just those who are in power, but the kind of actions of just everyday people along the way and the way that those can cause social change. And so there's a special interest there in communities that either are or have been marginalized from kind of mainstream participation. And then also with regard to institutions, we're really interested in the way that the kind of practices, the norms that we have in place in the background in social life can cause harm to people. And that can be intentionally or it can be unintentionally. A lot of times there are unintentional patterns that are built into our systems that really are problematic. So that background in sociology is, I think, a very helpful perspective to intersect with philanthropy, and thinking about the way that funding practices, volunteering, all the activities that we have going on are on the one hand helpful for potentially contributing to social change, but also can be problematic because of the same kind of, norms and practices that are in place more generally can also affect our field too.
There are colleagues among us who, when they talk about social justice, they think about the marketplace and therefore the business sector, or they think about public policy and therefore the government sector. And it's not to say that you don't also look at those other sectors, but you especially decided to focus on the philanthropic sector. I'm wondering why. Do you feel the sector's closest to the people with these grassroots nonprofit organizations, for example, or were there other reasons that really encouraged you to lend more of your work into the philanthropic sector as opposed to those other two?
Yeah, I think that I have higher hopes for philanthropy. I think it can be problematic too, just, like every area of life. But in terms of the other two sectors, I see more potential for good in the philanthropic sector. I think because we sit between the other two sectors, we have an ability to really cause some profound intersections, and the relationship building aspects of the field are really key, I think, to how actual, kind of social movements and everyday people can engage in activities. So the ways that people can volunteer in the sector, can create change, even if nobody's appointing them or employing them to do that change. And so I have higher hopes for it than I do the public and for-profit sectors, because we need those intersections.
You also talked about your passion for data. And I know in the faculty meetings that I've attended, you talk about big data, and data can be quantitative and qualitative. And I know I've learned a lot from you overall, including through your book, American Generosity, which is a wonderful mixed methods approach where you have quantitative and qualitative data. Before we dive into more specifics about your research, help us understand a little bit more about you. When you see that data table, do you just get excited to dive in and see what the data are saying to you? Or, as you gather qualitative data to look for those themes, is that an exciting moment for you as you are confronted with that opportunity to learn what the data are saying?
Yes, it is. I mean, if you can excuse the cultural reference, I always like to say working with a new data set is like Christmas morning. It's, for me, it's a gift. And the way that I get excited to unpack it, I think, comes from this kind of broader understanding as data as part of being a transparent, accountable, and just system. And the kind of background notion from sociology that we don't really do that. We as a group of people, anywhere and any time and any place, don't really do good things automatically and when we're not paying attention. It takes, conscious effort oftentimes to improve systems and to do our best actions. It takes ethical considerations. It takes hearing from lots of different, diverse and inclusive groups of, different communities, especially those who haven't always had a voice at the table. And so I think, data for me connect to that. So they're not this kind of, static, boring spreadsheet information. They're real people, real lives, real stories that exist in the cells and in between the quotation marks. And I get excited to just learn more all the time. I don't think there can be any end to what else we can figure out and know about people. So it's just always fun to open a new present of a data package.
When we think about practitioners, we think about the phrase best practices, and all of us can look up to a colleague we've had currently or in the past, somebody who we hope to emulate. She's a wonderful executive director. He's a wonderful fundraiser, and I can, kind of emulate their best practices. But how would you describe what's unique about data by formulating perspectives based on data, whether it be quantitative or qualitative, especially in these complex issues related to social justice? Can you just please help us understand what is the strength in having those data-informed approaches compared with the useful but different approaches that are just best practices that we see from practitioners?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that data call us out. I think that, if we rely on anecdotal information, just kind of those relationship-based experiences that we have with people, that's an important form of knowledge, but it's not the only form of knowledge. And it's especially susceptible to the biases in who we interact with, and so if I hang out with a bunch of people and they're all telling me similar things, then I could start to feel like, hey, that's the truth. But it turns out that the people I'm most likely to hang out with are not necessarily representative of, the rest of the population. For example, in academia, we're most likely to hang out with other people who also have a higher education degree or even beyond. Whereas that's not actually the average for, the rest of the United States or the rest of the world. And so if we want to actually hear from people who don't share our same social statuses, our same race and ethnicity, who grew up in different neighborhoods and different contexts, different kinds of school systems than we have, then we have to turn to data to get beyond those anecdotal and relationship-based forms of knowledge.
Well, that is so well said. The data call us out. And I love how you express that. And to ensure that we're talking to a broad range of people, gathering data from a broad range of resources, to gain the deepest level development of knowledge that we can put into practice. You've touched on this already at a macro way. Can you give us some specific examples of your research in sociology, and as you apply that to philanthropic studies through this lens of social justice? What are some of the themes that have stood out the most for you throughout your career?
Yeah, so broadly, I'm interested in social change, and that lands me in being very fascinated in young people. So I've had a long history of studying young people and the social changes, especially generational changes that are embedded in younger people growing up and becoming leaders. And then, that love for young people really brought me to an interest that has kind of taken off in my research more recently, which is looking at technology changes and the way that young people are ushering in new forms of technology into the organizations that they're working in. And then by way of that, I got interested in data analytics and machine learning, artificial intelligence, and how those broader data efforts are changing the field, and they're changing, what people will be doing in the field. When we think about what will fundraising look like in 10 years, what we know best is that it will probably look quite different than it does now, because of those kinds of changes. But I know that there will always be a role for humans in that. And so I don't have fear that AI will take over and automate everything. But I think that, people need to consider how their relationship with these machines that are set up to automate certain parts of the process will look different, and I get fascinated with understanding what that looks like. And then I also get concerned about, the kinds of inequality that can exist for young people, especially if they're not getting exposed to those kind of AI and data analytics technologies, and, kind of who has access to that information and who doesn't. So.
And this research has been expressed through your academic papers and presentations, books that you've written. What about in the classroom? What types of courses are you teaching based on this research?
So I'm very excited that we will be launching a class next year on data analytics at the advanced bachelor's level and graduate level. And the task will be for students in that class to be able to interact with data in the way that we've talked about, to see the way that data can cause harm, that people can be overloaded by too much data. But on the other hand, how people can engage data in ethical ways that help cut through a lot of the noise and help people to make better informed decisions. And so one of the fun things we'll do in that class is we'll make data visualizations that give people an interactive sense of, how to answer their own questions. So to be able to engage in a data set and say, okay, I'm interested in what you're showing me, but what happens if I change this factor? What happens, if these two factors come together in a way that I often see, in my organization, so that people want to be able to interact with those data. And we see that on a wide scale in our sector, but more generally with all the kind of data viz that's going on out there. So, so being able to help students in our class interact with those data and figure out how to make them usable for other people directly connects to the passions that I talked about in my research. And then in addition to that, I teach our Intro to Philanthropic Studies course and our Philanthropy and the Social Sciences course. And so in the Philanthropy and the Social Sciences course, it's kind of a continuation in a sense from the intro course. So the intro really lays the groundwork, helps students get a sense of, the size and the sector, the size and scope of the sector, kind of who's engaged, who's most likely to donate and why, who volunteers, and then, how much and for what consequences, just kind of getting a big overview of what we're up to. And then the Philanthropy and Social Sciences class kind of picks up from there and heads more into what does the research tell us, what do we know about all these different social factors that connect to our field, and especially focusing on the role of gender, race and ethnicity, youth, religiosity, these kinds of core social statuses that we see connecting to who's most likely to be donors, volunteers, take action, and so forth.
Dr. Herzog, building on that, in terms of philanthropy and the social sciences, how would you describe the experience our students receive in that they hear from experts from different social scientists. Your neighbors, as I think about our office space, are psychologists and historians and ethicists and economists, and they come from all these different disciplines and teach the different courses, as opposed to if I went to maybe a single topic type of a college in just business or just law, which I know have their distinctions as well. But what is that liberal arts approach that our students benefit from when they learn from you and our other colleagues who come from these different disciplines in the social sciences?
Yes, I think the school is very unique in offering that kind of an experience, which in a way is a microcosm of the broader sector. So when you're employed in the field, you're likely to work with people who come from a wide variety of disciplines and backgrounds, and that use those skills and backgrounds in really interesting ways in the field. So, you can have everything from an executive director whose degree is in acting, to a fundraiser who, like, let's say, works for an environmental agency and actually got their undergrad degree in environmental sciences. You can have a kind of a wide array because of the fantastic diversity of topics and approaches that we have in the field. And so within the school, we mirror some of those broader diversities in terms of, where we all come from and the perspectives that we bring. I like to think of the social sciences as offering sets of toolkits for, methods and approaches to studying people. And so they really can be applied to pretty much any topic, that involves people. And so that allows for a nice kind of collaborative way to think about how the different sets of knowledge and approaches that we have come together and informing us in the field.
So for our students, it's your cause, it's your passion, but then that's exposed to this broad toolkit, as Dr. Herzog explained so well, for many different disciplines that then you can apply in the philanthropic sector. Dr. Herzog, you've touched on this a little bit. I'd ask you to go deeper as we kind of look at a last topic area here. And that is, what does success look like for you as a professional in the academy as you serve students, whether that's in the classroom, at other opportunities for academic engagement, events, and so forth, or even when they are alumni and are in their professional career and staying in touch with you? What does success look like for you in that regard?
Yeah, I think as a sociologist by nature, I can't help but want people to be countercultural. I hope that we are creating agents of change who go out into their various organizations in the future and are calling themselves out and calling other people out, saying, hey, we think we know about this, but what do we actually know? Let's go out and treat this information, with the systematic attention that it deserves, and to think about what's really just in the way that we act. And, so first and foremost, that means taking the things that we take for granted as not necessarily the best way to do things, to question that and to be the person at the table that says, well, what if we looked at this really differently? And to challenge ourselves to see the unintended consequences of our actions and who they might be leaving out, and why that might be a problem. So I hope that we create some challengers. I hope they ruffle a few feathers out there,
Dr. Trish Snell Herzog is researching at the primary level, discovering new knowledge all the time that is informing the philanthropic sector, as well as the courses that she teaches as a member of the faculty at the Indiana University Lilly Family School of Philanthropy. I'm Bill Stanczykiewicz.